Welcome to the Roundhouse. I'm your host, Nick Ozrak, and this is Minisode number 5 of our Trains and Railroading podcast. And I've admitted the usual intro, and this is going to be a different kind of episode because we are addressing Amtrak's recent announcement, recent as of March 29th of 2018, announcement that they are discontinuing charter trains and certain movements involving private rail cars. And I wanted to make sure that we brought onto the show an expert in the matter so that we could look at this policy and what's going on and some of the other communications related to this to have this conversation. So our expert in this case is the president of the Railroad Passenger Car Alliance. Please welcome to the Roundhouse, Mr. Roger Fuehring.
Well, thank you, Nick, for having me on today. This is an important topic for us.
Yeah, it has a lot of implications and ramifications. So let's just start out with what it's difficult because there are some sort of gaps as far as what's being covered by this. But for people unfamiliar with the language in this, how would you explain what this public notice is conveying?
Well, the public notice right now is come down from Amtrak in regards to the charter trains. The charter trains are obviously worried about concentrating on improving Amtrak's performance through concentrating on their regular business and on-time performance. So those are the two major focuses that Amtrak's looking at. You know, they're running with the idea of a mandate from Congress. They're looking at trying to become more self-sufficient. They obviously have received more funding through the most recent budget bill that's went through. So those are the reasons that they're somewhat citing to us. However, it was quite a sudden shock to many of us to see that the charter trains that in some cases have already sold tickets for this year have been somewhat put on the back burner and told that they would not be able to run them. Charter trains such as the New River train that runs out of Huntington to Hinton. I believe this is the 51st year for it. So as we look at this, this is detrimental not only to our private car owners, but also to the local communities in which these charter trains run through the communities, and also how groups like the 261 group support themselves with their steam locomotive and their private cars that are all Amtrak certified and typically run by, Amtrak employees such as the New River train. So it's been a tough week. We've been working on this problem a little bit. Some of the rumors had come out last week, so we started working on this last Friday. And obviously, the public is seeing a lot more information that's been put out there by Amtrak there recently.
So, charter services aren't just specific to rail fans either. Obviously, rail fans are a major driving force behind them, but you have charters that are politicians. You have charters that are, one that I saw mentioned recently was apparently one that was going to involve the New York Yankees. We've seen them with sporting teams. Heck, we've seen them with primetime television and daytime television, like I think it was Good Morning America did a charter train. So this seems like they're cutting off their limbs in a bit because these charter trains were excellent publicity tools for them as well.
Correct. Because what we're not seeing in the general notice that you've seen publicly is also there are letters going out now to private car owners, including organizations that have private cars, that will no longer allow them to put their private cars on the back of Amtrak trains in intermediate points. So if it's not an originating destination or a beginning, such as Chicago or New York, those cars cannot be put on, such as the cars in Huntington is a good example. Huntington and other organizations and private car owners have, kind of support their cars through the process of being able to sell like one-day trips or most recently there's been some charter trips with private car to Washington, D.C. for the Cherry Blossom Festivals, to go there for like 5 days, 6 days, to be there even during times when there's legislation on the Hill that has to do with railroading. The neat thing about private passenger cars, as well as the charter trains, is we are goodwill ambassadors for Amtrak, because we make it very clear to the passengers that ride our trains. They may not ride an Amtrak train, but we make it very clear to them why we are there and that we need to support a national network for rail transportation. We're one of the very few countries that don't, of our size especially. And so for us to be out there doing goodwill with these cars, providing a first-class service, we have people out there that are riding these trains that are literally supporting Amtrak, even though they may have never ridden Amtrak. And, you know, those are all constituents to legislators in order not only on the federal level, but also on the state level. We're seeing so much more on the state level where they're supporting Amtrak in individual routes. So it's very important that those private car owners are out there, not only for our own cars to be out there supporting our organizations, but also as a goodwill to support our national rail network.
Something which was put in the employee advisory that was made public reads like this, quote, "These operations," referring to charters and special trains, "caused significant operational distraction, failed to capture fully allocated profitable margins, and sometimes delayed our paying customers on our scheduled trains." How would you respond to that particular reasoning?
Well, you know, not to dice words or anything like that, but I want to be careful because Amtrak does their best to always accommodate us. However, in different areas on Amtrak, there might be different regulations and rules, such as fueling locomotives based on blue flags being put up that are part of the federal regulations. And sometimes you find yourself in scenarios where things could be done a little differently to accommodate the private car without a delay. But 9 times out of 10, the delays are very minimal. Most of the time, what we find is we typically have a train that finds itself into a station that a private car is going to be set on that's already running late. And if it's already running late, we're not adding that much more time to it. Now, in some cases, they make that time up. So a good majority of the time, we find ourselves in situations where we're typically arriving into the inbound station on time, maybe even sometimes early. And so therefore, the whole ideal that on-time performance is being affected by private cars, we're not necessarily seeing that in the business that we do. Let's face it, if we were running late all the time, we would probably have a hard time with us selling tickets. So we don't quite see that the same way Amtrak's seeing that, and that's kind of a new thing for us. Now, on-time performance is important for everybody. The problem that the railroads, our Amtrak faces, is the fact that they're running on freight railroads a lot of times that have been very busy, especially during the oil boom of the tank car trains. At that time, when that was going on, I know just riding the Empire Builder was almost miserable, and I love riding the Empire Builder just because there was so many delays. Same thing with track construction. When there was this construction between Chicago and St. Louis, when they were rebuilding that railroad, bringing it up to better standards, it caused delays in the train. That had nothing to do with private cars. So, you know, to answer it, there's a lot of variables in it. I think the goodwill that the private cars bring to the whole picture, and the fact that our passengers don't typically always buy Amtrak tickets, but they'll buy a ticket on our car that'll be right on the back of Amtrak, gives Amtrak such goodwill that it offsets any delay that there may be, even though it disagrees somewhat with the numbers as far as on-time performance being affected by private cars.
Something that came up too in a conversation that I saw is, doesn't this go against Amtrak's own regulations? There's something that I saw as part of, I believe it was the Railroad Act of 2018, that says that Amtrak is encouraged to do operation of special trains, especially to bring attention, as long as those trains make at least $1 above the cost of the train?
Correct. There is one out there. It's not 2018. I forget the exact date. I want to say it's 2012, 2013. I actually have that on my computer, but it's one of those things where there's a little bit of a gray area. But however, when I say gray area, it's questioning what those special trains are. Some of us believe that we have no other option for special trains. In other words, most Class 1 railroads are not going to operate a special train unless Amtrak does it for them, for obvious reasons. They run freight trains. So to say, yes, there is a regulation out there, dictate from Congress, yeah, there is a written statement within the congressional record, I believe it's referred to, that states something along the special train, but I haven't got quite a ruling on that from the people that I've talked to. There appears to be a little bit of a gray area in there. So I'm very, at this moment in time, honestly, I think we're supposed to have an answer on that in the next couple of days.
Well, I look forward to hearing clarification on this, because one of the points that hasn't been clear, it seems safe for the time being, because it wasn't specifically targeted in the language of this, is being able to put private passenger cars behind previously scheduled Amtrak trips, as long as those cars are put on the train and taken off at terminals, as in the end of that train's run. Is that your impression as well?
At the moment, yes, I believe what Amtrak's current statement is that they will put it on at the beginning of a run and take it back off at the end of the run. So from point A to point B only, nothing in between. As far as the Congress dictate that we were previously discussing, it boils down to, as far as a private individual car versus a special train, there's obviously some gray area there. Keep in mind, when that was written, though, you didn't necessarily have railroaders writing that. As far as railroaders in regards to private cars, all these special charters and what have you. And I'll be honest with you, there's people out there that are a lot more knowledgeable on that particular regulation, because it's something that just came over the last couple of days that we've even had to dig into. And so we've got people that are a lot more, let's say a higher pay grade than me, that's looking into that right now, trying to figure out what that is. But right now, I want to make it clear, we want to work with Amtrak to try to solve the issue. We want to make sure that they have good on-time performance. We want to make sure that we are goodwill ambassadors to them. We want to put the best possible equipment out there in order to provide a good service for not only our customers, but for Amtrak's customers. And we certainly do not want to have anything that's going to be out there that's going to cause any disgrace to Amtrak in the form of safety and the form of customer service. We always try to give the best, highest quality of service on these cars. And if you ask anybody that rides these private cars, 99.9% of the time, you're going to have somebody that's extremely satisfied, even if the train's late, because they're sitting on something that is a classic piece of history, and they're normally getting some of the best service that they've ever received on a train in the United States.
I think part of what has a lot of us up in arms is this feeling that this was just sprung upon everybody. Nobody seemed to see this coming. There weren't, it was just bam, here it is. And hopefully, as you say, it's the kind of thing that there can be conversations between Amtrak and your organization and APRCO and some of these other representative groups of rail preservation, because I think we have enough strength and we are enough of a promoter of Amtrak that it seems to be in everybody's interest to make sure these respectful conversations are held and hopefully the right type of balance can be struck.
Yes, and that's one thing. We've been in conversation with the National Association of Railway Passengers. We've been in conversations with APRCO. We have all been on the same page. However, we also have to look at this from a different perspective, and that is the perspective of Amtrak. How are they looking at it? One of the negative things that I don't like to see is the things that you may see on social media that's out there literally tearing Amtrak apart over this. That's not the way to fix this, because once again, there is no alternative. Amtrak is our national passenger service, and we've got to try to do what we can to make it better. And in this particular case, yes, we've got a huge glitch in the road for all of us that own private rail cars. But in the end, what we want to see is a strong national passenger rail service. They have been given such a limited budget. They have to operate on track that is not theirs. They are constantly delayed by the issues that happened with CSX this year, or last year, actually. And those problems continue to happen. They're having to deal with the upcoming PTC issues that not all railroads are even, some of them are not even close to being ready yet to hit that deadline at the end of the year. And here Amtrak's mandated they have to do that. So Amtrak is finding themselves in a really tough spot right now. And yes, I would agree that I'm not pleased with how this came about. But I could also understand that sometimes mistakes are made in the time of trying to make decisions in order to make an operation work. And hopefully in time they will come around and see that we are a benefit for their operation as well as a benefit for goodwill for Amtrak, and we can get this resolved and we can help them make a strong nationwide network of rail travel, because there's no better way to do it. I mean, you get on an airplane, your person sitting literally a quarter of an inch away from you won't even talk to you. But you go on Amtrak and they're forced to talk to you. When you go to that diner and you sit down, you never know who you're going to sit with. I have been seated with a state senator one time out of Texas on my way back through on, I believe it was the Lakeshore. On the city of New Orleans once, I ended up sitting across from the president of Land O'Lakes Butter Company. I mean, you don't find that in air travel. And it's a unique way to travel. And Amtrak's got a lot of tough problems, from track conditions to class ones to dealing with state operations and what have you. And yeah, they don't do everything right. There's a million opinions out there on how they could do it better. But we all face that every day in the businesses that we run as well. To somewhat extent, they have to deal with the ever-increasing public that is more pro, obviously, to airlines, to driving, and a lot of people that don't want any support to Amtrak, that just soon all their funding go away. So we're here to support them, and in the end, we just want to get our private cars back online, get our charters going again, and just be a goodwill to help expand Amtrak's end goal.
So, Roger, for those of us who are following this, is there anything that we can do to help bring these necessary conversations to the table and be able to work out something that benefits everybody?
Well, I think the best thing you can do is write your state, your federal legislators, including your governors. I mean, a lot of the governors deal on a daily, or I'd say a weekly basis with rail travel into their communities. I mean, some states, Amtrak may only have a handful of stops. However, it's very important to those communities. If you've ever ridden like the Empire Builder through the Dakotas or up through Montana, it's absolutely essential to a lot of communities. So I think if you start writing your legislators and you tell them how important it is not only to support Amtrak, but also to support the private cars and the charters, those in West Virginia that deal with the Huntington New River train, those down in North Carolina and South Carolina that deal with excursion trips, those up there in Minneapolis, St. Paul area with the 261 project, even the ones that have not utilized Amtrak at this point in their communities. This is a key to have a strong national network. I mean, look at, I know a lot of people like to go back to 9/11 and look at when the airlines were grounded. In the end, even during snowstorms and what have you, there are times the trains can't run, I understand. But a lot of times in bad weather, those trains are filled up because people are trying to get home, especially during the holidays. And, the airlines are just getting more and more packed. The leg rest room, there is not. Let's face it, there's not leg rest on cars. There's leg rest on a coach on a Amtrak train. And so the best thing you can do is just write your legislator and tell them how important it is Amtrak is, and how important it is to see the private cars are utilized on Amtrak. There are businesses out there that even own their own cars, that utilize cars to get between point A and point B for the purpose of business. There are private cars that are used, obviously, for political reasons at times. You may see a presidential candidate on one and what have you. Those cars will disappear and be in museums if there's no way to support them. They will not exist. The only ones that will exist out there are the handful of eccentric ones where they may have be able to pour a lot of money into it to keep it around for those occasional events that Amtrak lets them run on. But for the majority of these owners have 9-to-5 jobs. They may be involved in business. There may be 10 guys that own one car. And, the example of the gentleman in Colorado, he's got a couple partners. He's a pharmacist, and he's about ready to have an Amtrak certified car within 6 weeks. But yet he's now, after all that he's invested into it, it's about to go away. We've followed all the rules and regulations for mechanically bringing these cars up to shape. If for some reason we don't follow a rule and they find the problem on the car, it doesn't run. But we don't see those issues. What we may see is mechanical failures over time, but it's typically something that is a common mechanical failure that you'd have on a regular Amtrak car, the same as a private car. So we're not out there causing issues as far as any safety issues with our cars. Our cars are really well maintained, and we just like to see them back out there running.
Couldn't agree with you more. Something I've been seeing circulate online as well, there's a petition on change.org, which I'll have a link to in the show notes for this episode. Strength in numbers right now as of recording this, it's slightly over 2,000 signatures. It's great to be able to demonstrate this, so that's something that when you're making those calls and writing those letters to your state representatives, that having something like that is always good to put out there. So, Roger, thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, once again, thank you so much for making this important for your listeners. I am right now distracted a little bit because, after a long several days of dealing with this, especially today, I've got my 4 grandkids and we're sitting here in a McDonald's playland. But what's neat about those grandkids? Every one of them have got to experience private car rides. They've got to experience being able to sleep on a sleeping car on New Year's Eve and wake up New Year's Day to open up presents from Santa Claus. The car doesn't even go anywhere when we do that on New Year's Eve. That's the next generation. And to see that generation's eyes light up, and they want to know more about those cars as they get older. I've got teenage kids that come around and they're just flabbergasted at these cars because it's something totally different from an iPad or something that they see on TV, something they can physically touch, a piece of history that's over 100 years old in some cases, and they get to ride on that. And it's for the next generation as well. So I want to thank you for making it a priority, not only for our members, but APRCO's members, NARP's members, and the others that are out there, the National Railway Historical Society's members, but also for the next generation and our kids and our grandkids.
And just to convey a sense of what it's like to do one of those trips, because I couldn't agree more, there's nothing like the experience of it. I'll have linked in the show notes 2 episodes in particular that exist because private cars could make these movements. One being the Joliet Rocket that happened in the summer of 2017, and the other being the Steel City Limited, which was a private car trip back in 2016. So I'll have those linked. So you want to see the significance and hear about the significance from others, you can check those out. Roger, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and hopefully we get to see some good news regarding this as the conversation moves forward.
All right. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it.